Welcome back. So I'm asking the question, what do we do? At every stage along the way, we've said, oh, Trump would never do that. And then he's done it. And there hasn't been a systemic response. What do we do if he gets indicted and decides to declare martial law? If his very fine people go into the streets and start burning buildings or shooting people? If Heather Heyer was only the first anti-Trump protester to be murdered by white supremacists? What do we do? What do we do if he puts, I've been asking this question here on Twitter. I've got a bunch of responses. Sandy D says, I think you should stress on a regular basis the idea you brought up of a dual impeachment of Trump and Pence, not just singular Trump. Thank you. Mig says, don't count on the Republicans to stand up to the corrupt president. They'll be silently next to him, unconditionally protecting their white privilege status. Otherwise, they have nothing. Epona's Muse says, wait for Kavanaugh to be seated, then expect Herr Trump's declaration to be president for life. There's no longer any doubt that that is where he is going now that he owns SCOTUS, the Supreme Court. Martial law will ensue to prevent Americans from protesting this. Let's ask somebody who's lived through it. Dr. Henry Oster was a child in 1933 when he and his family were taken off to out of the Lodz ghetto and taken to Birkenau, the extermination camp, and to a firing squad in Auschwitz, and then ultimately to Buchenwald, where he was finally liberated as a young man. The only survivor of the city of Cologne, as I recall, we would say Cologne, Germany, the only survivor of that city, of the 2011 Jews who were uprooted from that city in 1941. He wrote a book about this called The Kindness of the Hangman. Even in Hell There Is Hope. Henry Oster, Dr. Henry Oster is his name. The website is thekindnessofthehangman.com. Dr. Oster, welcome back to the program.
Well, thank you for having me back, Tom. It's a real privilege.
Is this question that I'm asking, in your opinion, having lived through the rise of Nazism in Germany, is this, am I off the wall here? Have I gone too far? Am I being an alarmist, number one? And, well, let's start with that.
No, first of all, you're not an alarmist because you're only repeating what history has shown repeatedly. There's a slight disagreement that I have with you, that you cannot forget we are America and we are Americans. We cannot compare ourselves to the German Nazis or the German population at that time, which was in full agreement with very, very few exceptions and very little opposition or resistance, primarily because they were inclined to agree with Hitler, and among other things because they were so intimidated by the threat of concentration camp and ultimate annihilation. And I'm not talking about Jews now, but I'm talking about the German citizen.
Right.
I am very optimistic. You mentioned about Trump's possibilities of martial law or declaration. He is not supported by the majority. He lost the majority. We have the peculiarity of an electoral college. We've had shown in the past, unfortunately, with Civil War, that this country is willing to go to war among ourselves, and there would be a resistance to some of these undemocratic and totalitarian ideas he may come up with. Right now, he's threatening to shut down the government unless he gets his way with the wall or immigration. That kind of totalitarian ideas are being proposed. In most cases, of course, he chickens out and backs out. But the threat is still there. If you look at the American population, which is not pure as the Germans consider themselves racially and ideologically, we're used to be called a melting pot. I consider our population more like a salad bowl. We do not lose our individuality ethnically, religiously, even politically. We're just like in a salad bowl tossed together. But if something comes along that is not in our American way of life, we will have ways to make things not occur the way a president wants it. The unfortunate thing is that he has his own political party support, which only currently is in the majority in the Senate, and not going to have his way the way he ideally wants it. He has to abide by the reasoning of our government. So I do not feel threatened as you might be. The only thing is, unfortunately, I may be wrong.
Oh, ouch. What does so basically what you're saying is that your faith in the institutions of this country is that, and the people of this country, is that both are more resilient than the German people were back in the 30s, and therefore there would, if Trump goes total wackadoodle, there will be pushback that will be successful. Is that essentially what you're saying?
I don't think he would be successful. I would hate to see the idea of martial law, and with everybody in this country gun-toting, who knows what kind of resistance and violence that may produce. Anything like this, I do not believe this country will ultimately stand for. Now, how to get rid of this president by normal, legal, illegal ways is another matter that some people might take into hand, and you might really have a violence that we do not anticipate and hopefully never see.
Oh, yeah.
I do
God forbid.
admire this country in one way. We did get rid of a president who violated his office and responsibility and allowed Nixon to resign and live normally, and even in some ways gradually a little bit more respectfully. I do not believe this country will violently overthrow a government. I'm also convinced, as we have seen in some cases, that some of his commands and some of his, well, I guess their commands were not fulfilled by those responsible. The military has its own way of evaluating irrational commands.
For example, they're not responding to his order on trans people in the military.
Well, I believe if we were, as he threatened, to push the bigger button that North Korea has, I don't think that the electricity would have gone through. There are guidelines, safeties that control the impulses and sometimes the command of the president.
So in order for a president to use war as a political instrument, the way George W. Bush did with Iraq, Bush in '99, before he was even elected president, told his biographer, Mickey Herskowitz, that if he became president, he was going to invade Iraq because the #1 way to be seen as a successful president was to exercise your power as commander-in-chief during time of war. And that war in Iraq would be large enough and long enough, unlike his father's. He said, my dad wasted all his political capital by only having his war 100 days long. He said, if I have that war, that war, or maybe it was 100 hours, whatever it was a short period of time, that if I have that war, it's going to be so successful that I'll be able to privatize Social Security, which he tried to do in 2005 after he was reelected. He gave a big speech. He said, I have political capital. So he lied us into a war for political purposes, Bush. You don't, but in order to do that, he had to get the entire Republican Party and then the media from Fox News to the New York Times all convinced that Iraq represented a threat to the United States and had weapons of mass destruction. All lies, but he had to convince us all first. Are you suggesting that if Trump tries to go to war in Iran to get out of his own problems, to distract us from his problems, that he has not yet done that sales pitch, that the American people aren't with him on that, and that he would have to?
I don't think that his own government will be or his own party will be entirely for that. Iran is not just some third world country like we like to make it out to be. We will be intimidated not to allow some of these things Trump has in mind to be fulfilled. Bush, for example, I was convinced, tried to be, with his limited capabilities, he wanted to be better than his daddy. And he said if daddy chickened out because Trump Bush Sr. said, we will not occupy Baghdad, because if you occupy a capital, you're responsible for the whole country. We were not interested in the country. We were interested in Saddam Hussein not to succeed like Hitler did in Europe, that Hussein would not succeed in the Middle East. And, of course, you had the coalition, and many other countries agree with it. The idea also, which a lot of people do not know, that Bush Jr. was bamboozled, guess what, by no other country than Iran. And here's what happened. The Iranian and the Iraqis fought an 8-year-long war to a stalemate. They sacrificed hundreds and thousands of young men, gave them a key around the neck that when you die, it's your entry to heaven, and they killed each other in huge masses, and nobody won. There was peace, sort of, an agreement.
Right.
The Iranians would not take that and would not allow this to be the final outcome. So they planted very cleverly through an arms deal and whatever it is, the idea that the Iraqis have secret weapons, chemical weapons.
Oh, is this Adnan Khashoggi?
I'm sorry, yes.
Is Mr.
And
Khashoggi?
what happened is that we believed it. We went for it. We fell for it. We didn't listen to the Israeli who said that's nonsense. We went for it. And what is the outcome? Iran is laughing up their sleeve. We, America, got rid of Saddam Hussein, which the Iranians could not do in 8 long years.
Yeah.
It was a victory for Iran by the action of an ignorant, an innocent perhaps, president, by the misleading and misplaced information of chemical weapons. How the hell would anyone come with a truck and make a threat?
Yeah.
How would you
I got
have
it.
missiles reach us?
Dr. Oster, we're hitting the break here. We're out of time. Dr. Henry Oster, his book is The Kindness of the Hangman. Even in hell there is hope. And thank you for the optimistic perspective. It's great talking with you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.